Are you a brand new agent, 3 years or less in real estate, trying to figure out how you can take your business to the next level, or heck, how about just get a business? Today's show is entirely for you. Vincent Kessel, welcome to the show. Byron Lazine, back on again, hanging out in Vegas. Vince, how long have you been in the business?
Just about a year and a half now.
Okay, so just for context, and how old are you now?
20.
20, and when did you turn 20?
In August.
In August.
Yes.
So you are not legal. You can't buy a drink, though my kids are trying to get you a fake ID. We want to talk about Danny Deals. Right. Oh, stay away from Danny Deals. We want to talk about how you went from zero to just under $15 million in your first year in the business. But I'm gonna give people a little context. I've known you your entire life. Mm-hmm. Your pops is a legendary real estate agent who said, you can't come work for me.
Right.
You, instead of being in the family nest in Melbourne on the mega team, the number one Compass volume team, transaction team, he said, you need to go figure out your own stuff.
Really?
And you chose a really easy market, Palm Beach.
Right.
Wow.
So give us the backstory. What did you do in the beginning of your career, and how did we get to $15 million or just shy of 15 in your first year in the business?
So getting in the business, right, I was a total introvert in high school. I had no friends, like nothing. Like all I did was work, right? So
in high school?
Yes, correct. So right out of high school, I was like, my dad was like, how are you going to get into real estate? You have no social skills. So I was like, okay, well, first of all.
That is confrontation, ladies and gentlemen. You have no social skills.
Yeah. So first thing, right, was I worked with DJ and Lindsay, and we were doing over 100 calls a day. So 100 calls a day, right, my confidence was like just boosting. People would tell me to like F off, stuff like this.
Wait, whoa. Your confidence was boosting as people were telling you not nice things?
Yeah, because I was like, because I was thinking about it, right? Like I was doing the numbers and I was like, every time someone tells me to F off, I'm making $38 on that call. So the more calls I make, the more money I make. So that was boosting my confidence. In addition to that.
What is that? Okay, so for the person that doesn't understand what you just said, how did you get paid $38 when someone was rude to you?
So I did the numbers, right? I was like, all right, so 15 million in volume. How many calls am I making a day on average? On those calls, and I just divided my volume by the calls a day, blah, 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 blah.
So you did like your volume, my commissions divided by how many calls.
Correct.
Whether they say yes or no, I made $38.
Exactly.
Why did you do that?
Because then I was thinking like, okay, so the more calls I make, the more money I make, right? Because that's the more appointments I set, the more appointments I go on, the more appointments I go on, the more contracts, blah, 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 right?
Right.
So that's like, all right.
Sound like a veteran. Blah, 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 blah.
Right. And on top of that, right, to boost my confidence even more, I would go to networking events. I couldn't carry a conversation with anyone back in the day. Back in the day,
a year ago.
Yeah. So I would go to these networking events where there's 100 lenders, 100 financial advisors, like just all the same people. And I'd bring 10 business cards. And in order for me to leave, I'd have to give out all 10 business cards.
Yes.
And it was like nails on a chalkboard for me because I hated talking to people, but I learned to get comfortable. I learned to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
So that really put me outside my comfort zone, which I believe definitely helped me get to my goal.
Tell us about your first transaction.
It was my first transaction, first week of the business, just hammering the phones. New lead comes in, set the appointment, and showed them one house. They bought it for $800,000.
Did you just think you were the shit?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I was strutting
That's like
in the
the
office.
worst thing that could ever happen.
Was this 22 or 21?
22.
It was beginning of 22?
Yeah.
So quarter one, quarter two, 22 makes sense.
World's on fire.
Absolutely.
Deals are just happening everywhere. Interest rates are still low.
But two totally different markets, right? Your second half of 22 and your first half of 22?
Yeah.
Night and day.
Yeah.
Night and day.
Which is good for your first year.
Oh,
you
yeah.
see both sides of it.
Right.
What a year to come in on.
Tell us about your biggest deal.
Biggest deal was about 4.3 million. That one was
just for context. How old was the buyer or seller that you represented?
First year.
She was about 70 years old.
Where did the lead come from?
Realtor.com.
No shit.
Lead came in. Yeah, at first she ghosted me, didn't want to talk to me whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I just kept calling her. That $38 a call, I kept calling her and calling her. And finally, like after enough emails and calls, set the appointment. First house.
No. So you're calling, you're texting, calling, you're texting. She has to go online and say, well, it looks a lot like my grandson. But when did she crack? Why did she crack? And I don't mean crack in a derogatory way. When did she finally accept the call and engage with you, and why?
because I kept sending her emails of properties. Like I would send her like, hey, saw this property, just hit the market and thought of you, right? Kind of tried to be a little touching in that sense.
Yeah.
And finally I sent her something that she just fell in love with, and she was willing to come like meet me, right? But I sent her probably 50 properties, and there was finally one that just hit the
Vinny,
spot.
I don't know if you realize this or not. If you've kind of researched 10-year vets, 20-year vets, even in a competitive market, in a high-end market like you're in, there's a lot of 10-year vets that are good agents that haven't done a $3+ million sale in their career.
Right.
And so you did it and that also speaks to those agents that are like poo-pooing those RDC leads, right?
Yeah.
And poo-pooing the follow-up. Well, they didn't connect with me right off the bat. I reached out to them. We didn't set an appointment right away, so they're a dead lead.
Right.
You did the complete opposite, which is why in your first year you got a $3 million+ deal.
Correct.
It's not going to be just some out of the blue thing for you if you continue to do that type of work.
Right.
It's insane.
What's the lesson? Do you have a lesson yet in all this?
In what do you mean by that?
What have you learned?
I've learned to just, one, be comfortable with being uncomfortable and be consistent. Consistent with your schedule, your calling, your appointments, and just, don't stop. Just keep making the calls.
So what do you say to the new agent that's listening right now and saying, well, my dad isn't the number one Compass, volume transaction, I didn't grow up in that situation, but I can kind of relate to the introverted side. I can kind of relate to the, that piece. I'm not comfortable making phone calls. What do you say to that person?
Well, do you want to make money? I mean, if you don't want to make money, then don't make phone calls. Or, I mean, whatever you're comfortable with, right? Like if you're comfortable with door knocking or making phone calls or just networking, just going to a bunch of events, find what you like, what you're good at, and just hone in on that, right?
What I think is even more interesting is, they may be saying, oh, well, but your dad didn't take you into his team. Right. So
No.
yeah, your dad's super successful in real estate in a variety of different ways, but you went out and joined another team. What do you say to the agent that's starting out that's saying, I'm going to do absolutely everything on myself. I don't need a coach. I don't need a team.
Don't need a mentor.
I've got a broker hanging my license and I'm going to go out there and do it. Do you believe if you weren't on that team that has coaching, that has mentorship, that has that type of leadership, knowing what DJ and Lindsay are all about, that you would have been that successful if you had not gotten around the right people?
Absolutely not. I think it's all about team. Just
Team come in a variety of different ways. Let's be clear here. We're not pushing
could be,
a certain model.
having a mentor.
Yeah,
team could be a broker that takes you under their wing, and it could be joining a team that like people like you guys run.
Try to visualize doing this business 100% on your own, hanging your license somewhere. What would it have looked like? 15 million to what?
I mean, if I were to. So are you saying if I were to go by myself?
At any brokerage,
100%.
no names, but any brokerage, you're hanging your license there and boom, you are just doing it yourself.
I mean, it would have been unimaginably hard. I mean, just because you aren't surrounded by the people that are doing the volume. You're not surrounded by like-minded people.
How about there are no leads to call?
Exactly. Exactly.
There are no leads to call.
Is the Realtor.com
to be afraid of. Well, no, he put it up and paid for Realtor.com on his own.
Oh, you did that? Okay.
Tell him that
All
story.
right. I didn't know if that was DJ and Lindsay lead.
No.
Yeah. So I moved from DJ and Lindsay, went to Compass. First 6 months was rough. I was like, what do I do? What is a lead? How do I get a lead on my own? Right. So then I was like, okay, I got to start.
You probably learned a few things with your time on the team.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes,
so
yes. It's called arbitrage.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So then I was like, okay, I'm really good at converting online leads. Let me buy some Realtor.com leads. And moving.
I'm 19. I should buy some Realtor.com leads. Think about that.
Right.
The investment in himself, in his business.
Right.
Right. And
Shout out to Coach Larry Webb, by the way.
Love Larry. Couldn't have done it without Larry. I mean, first 6 months did 2 million in volume. Following 6 months did an additional 10 million with Larry. Larry held me that halfway. But I mean, so the first lead spend was $13,000. And mind you, didn't have any production for the following 6 months after DJ and Lindsay. It was on my own, had an apartment.
Like really starting over.
Yeah.
Off the team,
Yeah.
into the plunge, right?
Yep.
Yep.
So I was like, okay, bank account's running low, kind of stress in here, but failure's not an option, right?
Yeah.
So then just went back to hammering the calls. Like the more calls I make, the more money I make, $38 a call.
Yeah.
And that's when I started gaining traction. And then 1 month I did, 6.3 million in volume 1 month. And that was just like, it was like a boulder was just relieved off my chest.
Yeah.
And that really kind of gave me that kickstart to keep going even more.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. So you text me and said, hey, should I buy a Porsche? What was my answer?
Absolutely
Is that
not.
after the deal?
Absolutely not. Why do you think I said, not only do I love you, you're like another son, right? Why do you think I told you after you had a bombing year, don't go buy a car?
Well, I mean, it's one, ego is, I would say, a big one. And two, it's just financially doesn't make sense.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Thomas told me, no, don't make that investment, let alone buy a toy. Right.
right. A depreciating asset.
And for the person listening, I mean, this isn't just because of the close family bond and you and I, just our relationship forever. It's like, you need to have some delayed gratification.
Correct.
Right. You need to realize I'm 34 years into doing what I'm doing. And now I can say, okay, I can kind of, do some things and have different experiences because I've earned it. Right. Like I don't want to see people put themselves behind on payments, and that stuff just scares me.
Interesting that it was the car. Did you play a trick on your mind thinking if I buy the Porsche, I'm going to do more $3 million deals?
Yes.
And would it also change people's perception of you?
100%.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's the story you were telling yourself.
Of course.
But the reality is you did a $3 million deal with what car?
My Mercedes.
Yeah.
Used.
Yes.
For sure used.
So
sell the Jeep, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
you got to sell the Jeep. You got to get a real estate car. You can't drive around in your
that is
bombing high school Jeep.
I have an agent
Yes.
that I'm partnered with. She's a legacy agent on our team. Shout out Ann, who's like, Byron, all agents should get used Mercedes Benz. They're reliable. They're a great real estate car. You look good. You can relate to the medium price point. You can relate to the high end price point. Used Mercedes Benz. She just swears by them.
Yeah.
So there you go. Stick with that.
Yeah.
And her brother sells used Mercedes.
Yeah, I think so. Something like that. I'm like,
It's gotta be
again, you're
backstory.
really pushing this Mercedes on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, why not BMW? Why not Lexus? Why not whatever you want to drive?
Yeah.
All right. So Vince, first of all, thank you for being on the show. Byron's been on with me a bunch. We do all this kind of stuff.
This is cool though.
It is very cool to see someone I've known your entire life to watch you struggle. I mean, I remember the night we were in Miami at a mastery mastermind, and Kirk and I, and Vinny's like, okay, she just said this. Right, his $4.2 million. She just did this. We're like, okay, just use this line, and then we go back and have a glass of wine, and he's running away and right in the heart of everyone knows what I'm talking about. Like in the middle of this, he's like the commission, and we're just like having a glass of wine, just giving some coaching. To watch you go through all that struggle and all that hardship, and to know what's in front of you. I know with your dad watching, I wish I could buy like 25% of your future earnings right now on the spot, because it's going to be ginormous. It'd be the best investment ever.
I'm in for 12 and a half.
We'll split this deal. This one we could do. This one we could do.
Well, because listen, you're getting in the room. Your dad said no, and you didn't take that as like, okay, I'm going to go do something else.
Right.
Real estate's not for me. You went and still got in the room anyways.
Correct.
And I think that's a big takeaway for agents, no matter where you are in your career.
Right.
Get in the room with the people that are doing it.
That's right.
So these big time athletes, they're not just going and trying to figure out every move on their own.
Yep.
Right? What did Kobe do? He got in the room with the guy that brought Jordan to the next level.
Right.
Get in the room.
Right.
You're getting in the room over and over again.
I just listened to a podcast on Kevin Hart, which I'll send to you. And he said the same thing. He said, man, in my culture, like no one told me about these rooms that everybody else was getting into. And the second I started getting in these rooms, all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute. I should own the production company. I should own the studio. I should own this. And they all laid out exactly what I had to do. And that, like, I think for the people listening right now, they're entering the room with us.
Yep.
So as we wrap this up, thank you so much for watching. Definitely follow this character, right?
Yes.
Absolutely watch him, because this is just a star in the making. You have a lot of work to do, kid.
Yes.
And I love you. You got a lot of work to do, but you had a good start. Closing thoughts before we bounce?
I'm super impressed, man. You're way ahead, certainly where I was at 19, 20 years old. I was making huge real estate mistakes at that age. And so take the advice from Tom. Like really, I wouldn't be worried about every dollar you're making this year. I'd be worried about how do I invest into more rooms like this to get the knowledge, because in 30 years, in 10 years when you're 30, oh my, you're going to be so far ahead of so many people.
Yep.
So hats off to you starting early. Just keep that mindset of delayed gratification, like Tom said.
I love that.
And every person that reaches out answer their questions on, Instagram,
Yeah.
right? Be a support for others as this community has supported you, and it will pay you back more in here than any place else. Right. Just be a support for everybody else too.
I love that.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Leave some comments. Let us know what you think. Follow these guys and listen, keep up the good work. We got your back. We're behind you. Let's go.